sacrifice of recovering the booster if it loses 2 of its 9 Merlin engines right at liftoff. It can still make it with 7. You just wouldn't get the booster back because it would basically have to burn to depletion. But Starship would have that sort of engine out capability to handle that with the decrease in mass, and it also could provide the ability to take more payload to orbit, because if you increase the thrust of those engines, you can save mass down there, and that could translate to additional mass that you could then take to orbit, or which you can then take to any point in the solar system.
Здравствуйте, друзья, подписчики моего канала. Сегодня у нас, значит, ориентировочно, сегодня ожидается запуск всем давно известного корабля Илона Маска Старшип SN-15. Ориентировочно вообще на сегодня на полигоне американской компании SpaceX у деревни Бока-Чика в Южном Техасе возможен испытательный полет очередного образца ракеты Старшип. Поскольку это тест-полет, точного времени запуска нет, только ориентировочное. Вот. Программа полета прежняя, подъем на высоту 10 километров, переворот в горизонтальное положение и контролируемый закрылками спуск. На подлете к посадочной площадке быстрый переворот в исходное вертикальное положение, посадка с тонким дросселированием двигателя. На разных стадиях готовности на Старбазе, будущем космодроме SpaceX, находится десяток образцов таких старшипов. До конца года глава компании Илон Маск вообще надеется осуществить орбитальный тест-полет полноценного прототипа звездного корабля. Вот такие дела будем наблюдать, следить за этим интересным нам, я думаю, всем стартом. Будем ждать ориентировочно, наверное, часа через 2, я думаю, где-то это произойдет. Так что заходите на мой канал, смотрите, кому интересно.
I did my best. Hey, greetings from Dubai. Just wondering, what is the criteria for choosing the launch place/region, and can the rocket be launched from anywhere in the world?
So yes, in theory, the rocket can be launched from anywhere in the world. It can be launched even from sea platforms in the middle of the ocean, which is part of the design for Starship, actually. What comes down to choosing a specific launch place when we're talking about ground-based and land-based launch systems and launch facilities, it kind of depends on what you want the vehicle to do. If you're designing a vehicle to primarily be a rocket that takes large satellites into geostationary orbit, you would want to be as close to the equator as you possibly can, because you're trying to launch east and you want to use as much of Earth's eastward rotation as possible to help you out, right? And basically give you an extra little boost. And the closer you are to the equator, the greater that boost becomes. If you're trying to do polar, you want to be as close to the poles as you can, because it's the same principle, but in reverse. You're trying to counter Earth's rotational velocity because it's a hit to you. So the closer you are to the poles, the less of that hit you take. But they can really be, and then you have safety considerations, right? Like in Russia, they try to find very isolated places in the northern part, and down in Kazakhstan, and out in eastern Russia for Vostochny, where they're very sparsely populated, and if you need to go evacuate a village because they are under the flight path, you can do it very quickly and very easily. Because they have to launch over land from their ports. We in the US try to say we're not going to launch over land, we're going to launch over water. So that automatically eliminates a large part of the United States and just gets you to the coastal regions. And then that's where the sort of, what's the benefit of your launch location?
And it should be noted East Coast as well because of the rotation, correct?
Yes, so if you're going for those geostationary missions or ones to the International Space Station, yeah, you want the East Coast on that. And Brownsville can be considered the East Coast in this regard because they would go east out of Brownsville.
And so for people who maybe don't know, Boca Chica and Brownsville are basically the absolute southernmost tip of Texas.
Yeah, and we really mean that because you can definitely see the U.S.-Mexican border, and sometimes your phone thinks you're in Mexico as a nice little bonus on a bill at the end of the month.
Oh no.
There's actually a border checkpoint. I don't know if we've ever talked about this on stream, but there's a border checkpoint to get to Boca Chica.
Really? Well, but it's in the U.S.
Yes, and so it's not a border check to get to it. It's a border check when you're coming back from it because the U.S.-Mexican border on the beach.
Yeah, where you can just like hop on a boat.
Yeah. So there is a border checkpoint when you are coming back toward Brownsville.
Wow. Goodness.
Which the first time I did that freaked me out because I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to want to see? I didn't bring my passport.
Yeah, sure. If you're just unprepared for it at all, goodness.
Yeah, but I mean, it's it's just like it's check your ID, stuff like that, and off you go. Yeah.
We're getting backed up on super chats. We've got a lot of people being very, very generous, and I'm gonna try to let's see. How do you feel about just a rapid fire session, right quick?
I think that's good. Yes.
Okay, great. From Kevin Martin, we got 10 euros. Why wasn't the ISS designed in a way that modules could be decommissioned and removed to be replaced with new ones sent up, allowing it to continuously update itself?
So in a way it was for some of the science labs and modules, like it would be difficult, but not, or I shouldn't say difficult, it would be time consuming to like remove Columbus from the European Space Agency or Kibo from Japan and bring them back and reservice them or swap them out with newer ones. But there are certain ones that you can't do that for because they literally contain the life support systems.
Sure.
I think what this question is getting at is the whole Russia, it might be leaving the International Space Station and they can't take their modules with them. They have to transfer them to us because the Russian modules are designed to be the control and life support primary modules on the scene. Yeah, so and that's just the way we designed it. Yeah, so like we could, it's not impossible to do it, but it would be time consuming, and some modules you just couldn't do it unless you had already pre-stationed one to take over.
From Pebmets, we got a $20 super chat. I'm also a big shuttle fan with all of its tech challenges. I still look at its great accomplishment. Do you think SpaceX can take advantage of what worked for shuttle in terms of reusability for Starship?
Oh, definitely. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, right? Like we're seeing the thermal protection system tiles on one side of it. We're seeing a design that has huge cargo up mass and down mass capability, and can be optimized for either crew or cargo or both. And yeah, I mean, it's taking all of the best ideas from the shuttle and the lessons learned about what didn't work, and what we learned about reusability, and incorporating all of those with a lot more, that we've learned from other areas of the space industry, as well as new construction techniques that just simply were not available in the 70s when the shuttles were designed.
Sure. Just to confirm, so when you say up mass and down mass.
Oh yes, thank you.
So that's stuff that can go up and stuff that can go down?
Yep, that's exactly it. So
cargo up and cargo down.
Yeah, it refers to how much cargo they can take up and down, which for Starship is about 100 metric tons up.
Shoo.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. From Bonesy, we got a super chat from I think Hungary. Is there enough fuel on Starship to flip and brake and enter stable Mars orbit but not land, refuel in orbit, and then more safely land propulsively?
So Starship is designed that it would be refueled here in Earth orbit and would contain all of the propellant that it needs for the Mars entry and landing sequence. Would it be possible to refuel a Starship in Martian orbit? Certainly. Would it be possible for a Starship to simply do an orbit, a braking maneuver to enter orbit of Mars? Certainly. There could be great benefit to that in terms of delivering huge communication satellites to Martian orbit from Earth. But the amount of fuel inside of it does not determine how, like, if it could more safely do a propulsive landing. That is the safety of the landing is largely governed by the throttle ability range of the Raptor engines. and then literally just working the physics backward to, okay, what's the mass of the vehicle? How quickly are the Raptors going to slow us down before we're at the surface? And that gets you the time of ignition and above the ground as well. And it'll be slightly different for Mars than it is for Earth because of the different gravity fields. But you also kind of want Starship to have, in terms of propellant in its main tanks, you have to be majorly concerned with the center of mass of the vehicle when it's coming in to do that landing. So it's not so much more fuel to maintain safety, but maintaining the center of mass of the vehicle for the flip and burn landing.
And a quick update, it does, Jack is out there around the launch site right now, and SpaceX is actively deploying their own camera robots, should we say, in the surrounding area. So that is a sign that they are still working towards a test flight today.
That sounds pretty promising. On that note, we actually have a super chat asking how low should wind speeds be for a launch today. I don't know if you have a number or a range.
Ooh, I don't think we've ever got...
It's currently about 13 knots, and I know that it is currently forecast to well, sort of lessen up and be a little bit nicer on us for the wind. But I don't know if there's a specific number.
I have not seen specific Starship weather criteria for launch.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of specifics, exactly what Michael just said, to a more broader sense, there definitely are launch wind constraints and landing wind constraints, as well as in-flight wind and wind shear constraints. But what those are, we simply don't know.
From Glenn Ade, I've heard that the rail system partially depends on environmental study that is underway for site expansion. I think that's in reference to what we were talking about before. We had a question on if SpaceX had been considering having a sort of rail delivery system for Starship.
Were we talking about that in terms of like a rail system to deliver parts, or like a rail system to transport them from the assembly facility out to the launch area?
To the launch area, exactly.
Yeah,
so you were talking about eventually, I believe it was it every other hour having a launch eventually? Is the hope?
That's what Elon said. Yeah, like that the boosters can, like that the boosters are designed to be reused, like basically in the amount of time it would take to catch them, put them on the pad.
По имеющимся данным, на корабле Старшип SN-15 проведены неоднократные статистические огневые испытания двигателя. Уже по их итогам никаких замен двигателя не производилось. Корабль установлен на стартовой площадке на полигоне компании SpaceX Бока-Чика. Это значит, на юго-востоке штата Техас, готовности к запуску. В рамках испытания прототипа SN-15 должен будет выйти на 110 километров. Ну, как я уже говорил. Предыдущие 4 суборбитальных испытания прототипа корабля закончились неудачей. Они взорвались при посадке из-за технических проблем. В ходе последнего испытания, которое состоялось 30 марта, прототип корабля SN-15 после суборбитального полета взорвался за минуту до вертикальной посадки. По словам основателя компании, Маска, причиной стала утечка метана, которая привела к возгоранию двигателя номер 2. Поджарила часть авионики. Но в конце апреля Маск сообщил, что на прототипе SN-15 по сравнению с предыдущими версиями проведены сотни конструктивных усовершенствований. Ну, посмотрим, как они проведены у него. Если он не приземлится, будет не очень хорошо. Для Маска, я думаю, тоже. Уже неоднократно потерявшим. Хотя он радуется, ничего. С ним такого и плохого настроения я не вижу в нем. Потихоньку двигается в своем направлении, делает намеченные все свои дела. Пока молодец. Ну, посмотрим, последим за сегодняшним стартом, если не будет опять перенесен или отменен.
So, there is something to be said
в общем,
for successfully demonstrating the ability to get to orbit, even if you're still trying to perfect the landing. But yeah, in terms of how many prototypes are needed, we don't know. If for some reason 15, 16, and 17 can't perfect the landing, they might still try the orbital one. on 20, just to demonstrate its ability to launch, be in orbit, maneuver, and do the like plasma stage of reentry successfully. But we really don't know. It's a great question though.
We've got one from Unordinary Programmer. Do you think that it'll be possible for Starship in the future to reach the moon without requiring so many tanker starships?
Reach the lunar surface? No, it's going to have to be refueled for that. It can, however, without being refueled, do a free return circumlunar navigation flight. So basically, it would be it would launch itself into an initial Earth orbit, right? And then at a certain time after that, it would fire up its engines again to do the burn to get it to the moon, called the translunar injection burn. But it would design that translunar injection burn in a way where it would intercept the moon's gravity and just basically boomerang around the moon and be aimed perfectly back for where Earth will be in 4 days for the entry and landing. It can do that without being refueled, but it needs to be refueled to carry any sort of meaningful payload into lunar orbit or to the lunar surface.
All right, so we got a couple of super chats I'm going to do here. Let's see if I can get some quick ones in. From Kevin Hill, we got a $25 super chat. Kevin, thank you very much for the support. He says, thanks for the fantastic background chatter for my workday. Hop good, bounce bad. Indeed, Kevin, indeed. From Amtank, we've got a super chat that says, rockets brought to you by viewers like you. Exactly correct. Thank you again to everybody who's popping in those super chats or even becoming a member. It helps keep the lights on. Thank you guys very, very much. From Tybo, we've got $15 for 15. Here's to a good flight. We can only hope, Tybo. Thank you very much. Bob Brown with $9.99. Bob, thank you very much for the support. From Danielle Oliveira Santos, we have a super chat that says, is weather a potential...
Стало еще известно вот буквально недавно, что Федеральное авиационное агентство ФАУ США одобрило проведение еще 3 запусков прототипов, предназначенного для миссии на Марс вот этих кораблей Старшип компании SpaceX, значит. Значит, по их данным, регулятор принял данное решение после того, как компания внесла некоторые изменения в прототип после последних неудачных испытаний. Отметили, что перед запуском Старшипа SN-15 ФАУ должно будет удостовериться в том, что SpaceX
There are liftoff specific winds. There are also winds aloft. The upper level winds are wind shear. Now, if they only go to 10 kilometers,
внесла все коррективы, необходимость которых была выявлена во время расследования, улучшение прототипа еще Старшип SN-15. Необходимым условием также является присутствие на объекте в районе Бока-Чика, значит, где осуществляется запуск инспектора по безопасности ФАУ. Кроме того, при последующих запусках кораблей Старшип SN-16 и Старшип SN-17 компания также должна будет вносить изменения в соответствии с результатами новых расследований аварий, если они будут проводиться. Агентство не приводит, конечно, даты новых испытаний, но указывает, что прибытие инспектора ФАУ в Бока-Чика ожидается в четверг для участия в возможном запуске. Вот так вот на следующей неделе. Такие дела. Посмотрим, как этот космический корабль многоразового использования, предназначенный для полетов на Марс и рассчитан на 100 человек. Маск ранее сообщал, что первый испытательный полет на околоземной орбите, вероятно, пройдет в текущем году. Но, конечно, допустил, что эти планы могут пересмотреть. Я думаю, что вряд ли у него это получится. Больно он шустрый, конечно. Но достигнет этого, думаю, в следующем году. Все зависит от испытаний. SN-15. Что будет SN-16, как будет испытан. Надо будет все это смотреть, следить.
So much of what's on the lunar Starship variant is also applicable to the other variants of Starship, be they cargo, crew, especially the crew one, or a like hybrid crew cargo variant. So it's a little hard to say. I think I would answer it this way. The things that are very specific and unique only to the lunar variant likely have to stop. I don't think that means SpaceX has to stop working on the environmental control and life support system that would be used on the lunar variant, because it's also the life support system that would be used on the crew variants that they are planning as well. So it's a little tricky in that regard. So I'm going to go with a firm yes/no.
There's still development to be done, but maybe not in all areas, really.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And we do have another quick update, Derek.
Yeah.
Jack is saying that the forward flaps on SN15 are still chained down, so we should expect, in that case, 2 lifts to go up and unchain the forward flaps before they clear the pad. So we'll look for that to happen.
Так, появились уточнения, что новое окно для испытательного полета Старшипа этого откроется где-то вот по московскому 20:00 по московскому времени. Поэтому пока я трансляцию эту прерву, а вечером снова возобновим просмотр уже четко.
Hopefully it's not a rocket exam. Cheating. Nah, you're all good, Ralph. I'm glad you're listening.
You can actually see the chains of the forward flaps in this camera if you look closely at the top of the vehicle.
Oh, you can, yeah.
Sure, look at that. Wow.
This is one of those moments where I wish we could do like a CSI Miami. Enhance.
Enhance. It doesn't work like that.
I know.
From Pebmets. $20 super chat. I am still a fan of the shuttle, even with its challenges. It was still a great accomplishment, IMO. Do you believe SpaceX can take advantage of things that work for the shuttle, like thermal protection, re-entry characteristics, etc.?
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I thought we had just answered this question, but re-entry, but this is really detailed.
Really close to a previous one, yeah.
Actually, yes. Since we talked about some of the other stuff, yeah, let's talk about the similarities and differences with the real quick with the thermal protection and re-entry characteristics, because those are very different. You know, Starship is made of a different material, which has a much higher melting point than Shuttle. Shuttle had an aluminum airframe, and this is using steel, right? So steel has a much higher melting point than aluminum in that regard. So its thermal protection system can be different. The main difference is it will not have a thermal protection system per se on the side that we're looking at right now. This is the side that is the top, like the bell. Like, yeah, this is basically like the. Yeah, I don't know how to describe this. It's basically the top, side.
Like the side. No, I understand. So it's.
It's not the side that comes into the atmosphere that's covered with all your tiles on the back side. Sure. And because of the higher melting point of steel, you can actually on Starship just really polish the steel on that side. So it's so reflective, because what you're trying to do on the leeward, that's the word I couldn't think of earlier, the leeward side of the vehicle is you're trying to reject any heat that might be trying to circulate back as the plasma is forming around the vehicle as it's coming in. Whereas on the windward side that's exposed to that plasma, and areas on the flaps, right, need thermal protection system tiles, because it's not just enough to try to reject the heat away from the vehicle. The tiles actually need to absorb the heat and then slowly radiate it back out in that regard. And then it just comes down to the aerodynamics of the vehicle, how the flaps are situated when it's coming into the atmosphere like that, before they're needed in the lower atmosphere, how they're used to steer for cross-range capability on Starship during re-entry. And that drives how much of the flaps on both the on the leeward side have to be covered with tiles. So that's why you'll see some of the flaps with tiles on a side of the vehicle that doesn't have tiles, because they're just going to be doing different things in the entry sequence that require them to have additional protection. The other big thing with re-entry characteristics is that Starship will not have nearly the cross-range capability that the Space Shuttle had. The shuttle could cross-range something like 2,000 kilometers, 1,500 miles, if it needed to. It basically could be one full orbit away and still make it to its landing site. Starship will, yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating why, but it's not germane to this conversation.
Sure.
But basically, Starship with its flaps will have some ability to cross range to the landing site. So the ground track won't have to be perfect. It can work within a degree to that, but just not to the extent that the shuttle could. And its entry characteristics are just going to be slightly different because it's bigger. Its payload isn't going to be in a big bay in the center. It's going to be up at the top. You know, all of those things will lead to slight changes as to how the vehicle flies its reentry profile before it starts falling for the landing site.
Sure. A couple of questions on the stainless steel from chat. These aren't actually super chats. These are just from chats. So we have number one from Tinker at Forge. Do we know what specific stainless steel is used in Starship?
Oh boy, there's some. Yeah, it's like a. Oh gosh, Michael, help me out. What's the variant they're working on?
Primarily 304L.
304L.
There might be some other variants in some small places, but it's mostly 304L.
Yeah, and they have talked about like a like SpaceX proprietary version of that too. But that's the kind of steel. Thank you, Michael.
And then, in that regard, if steel isn't as good for radiation protection, why is it being used in a long-range Starship?
Yes, because it's not necessarily good for radiation protection, but it's immensely good for the two things that Starship is trying to do. In some ways, be a brute force vehicle that doesn't need a lot of thermal protection system, like we just talked about. Its high melting point provides you a lot more range when you're entering atmospheres. The other, it's also the durability and the reuse element of it. That is the best way to go in that regard. And then you can look at doing radiation protection inside of your vehicle instead of having the entire vehicle try to serve as a radiation buffer.
There you go. Thank you very much for those answers. It's always interesting because it looks like I mean, the joke is it's a big grain silo.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't look like some of the rockets that we've seen in the past. You know,
It doesn't. It looks like It looks like what people thought rockets would look like back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And,
right.
and what I love about it is like, it just took reality, however many years, 70 years to catch up to that.
Yeah.
And go,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is what they should look like.
They were pretty close, actually. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, SpaceX, of course, did not set out to make them look like that. They literally tried to find the best design.
Landed on. Yeah.
Yeah, and here it is.
Trying to keep it up with super chats. You guys, thank you so much for all of the support. It really does help us out here. From Jonathan McElroy, why aren't other rocket companies replicating this development approach? Is this iterative approach too expensive, too difficult?
Great question.
I think it's less expensive because
Yeah.
you end up these prototypes are very cheap to build. They're being built in tens. I mean, cheap is relative, obviously, but an operational version of a rocket is a lot more expensive to produce because the quality standards are higher and it has a lot more features. This is kind of the bare minimum amount of features needed to test a Starship's critical phases of flight. And if you find a problem at this time in development, you can easily change it. If you find a development, like if SLS finds, obviously hope this does not happen, but if SLS were to find a critical flaw with the core stage at this point, it would be a big trouble. But they haven't flown it yet, so they have to be really sure that they don't make any mistakes. With this iterative development, on the other hand, you have a lot of room for error early on in development, so you get to test a lot, and ideally you will find potential design flaws before you enter the production phase, which will save you money in the long term.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I wouldn't say it's too expensive. I think I would either agree with you outright that it's a little bit less expensive, or maybe ends up being a wash in the end because of like some of the more expensive things that you could destroy, like Raptor engines in that regard. But they're two very valid approaches. but I think what drives a lot of the secrecy in development doesn't necessarily stem from, you know, the U.S. government side of things. You know, NASA does broadcast their tests of SLS to a degree. Like, we don't see all of them, but then again, neither does SpaceX. We broadcast the tests for SpaceX, you know, along with a few others. And you know, I think what really holds some other companies back from doing this type of testing is the idea that your developmental failures are scars that you don't want people to see. Whereas SpaceX's approach is like, nah, like, this is hard. Let's just do it. And we're going to talk about how hard it is, but we're going to have a product at the end. And you just happen to get to see it all because they test in the open and they want to do that. So I think it's just a holdover really of what developmental issues and finding them and ferreting them out. I think it's just, how does the company view it? Do they view those things as negatives, or do they view those things as positive moments of change and advancement in the technology?
And right there on your camera, sorry, I think that might be the sheriff deputies headed towards the beach. It's hard to tell, but I did see a couple of SUVs before I cut there, and then as I cut, there were a couple of SUVs and a white pickup that I think might have been the sheriff. I'm not positive, but that would be a really good sign if we see them start clearing the beach.
Absolutely great news, yeah. Joining us now, we actually have Thomas, what is it? Is it Berghart? I haven't actually said your name out loud before, Thomas.
Nope, you got it just right. How's it going, Derek?
Very good. How are you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing good, and hey, everybody. How's
Hello.
the Texas Tank watching going this morning?
Oh, it's going fine, my German descendant brother.
Yeah.
Yep. My last name is just as confusing, and then I just go by DK. Just don't just don't bother. Don't worry about it. Well, with that, I'd like to go and try to just go through a bunch of these super chats. We're getting so many in, and thank you guys so much for the support and helping us. It's really does help us keep these streams up.
And really quick, I'm going to interrupt you to confirm. It's important that Jack on the ground has confirmed those were sheriff deputies. So that is a very good sign that they are pressing forward with the flight today.
Excellent.
Super good news. Thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good. That's an important update. From Double Ubs, we've got $4.99. Greetings from Bald Head Island, North Carolina, watching with my two boys. And hi, Dad, who's watching in Virginia. Thank you guys very much for the support there. Chris Barnett, hello from the UK. What's going to happen when the spaceport is finished? Will SpaceX have to close the road and airspace for every launch?
Airspace, yes.
Yeah, so certainly airspace.
Yes. Sorry, that seemed like a humorous answer. I didn't intend it to be. No, my pause after saying that was actually because I wanted to sort of say closing the airspace definitely, and it's not as big of a deal to close the airspace over Brownsville as it is over the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral, because the Kennedy area and the Cape are on major air traffic routes up from South America, Central America, the Caribbean, up toward Atlanta, New York, Washington. Mm-hmm. It's a heavily trafficked route, so closing the airspace multiple times here, the FAA really likes to constrain the windows, which is why when it's a big government mission going to geostationary orbit, you have a 4-hour window, but when it's a Falcon 9 trying to launch Turkey's telecommunications satellite, it's 2, because the FAA doesn't want to close the airspace for 4 hours.
Sure.
But in Brownsville, there is no major air traffic route over the area, so it's much easier to close it in that regard multiple times than it is over the Cape.
Yeah, and as far as the road closures, I mean, it's difficult for them to get a public access road out to the beach in that area because of all the protected environmental areas around. So I think what they would have liked to do is have a new road out to the beach that can stay open for the most part, and leave that road that goes right through the launch site kind of a spaceport road, and have that basically close it off like you would at Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, and have like a base, if you will. I would imagine that would be preferable, but I don't know if they can do something like that. Either way, they'll need to likely put up roadblocks and things like that for launch operations, just like they do here in Florida. But airspace closures would persist pretty much just like they have been.
All right, from Erland, we've got 50 Norwegian krona. Will starships in the future, of course, have nicknames like Space Shuttle Endeavour? Any suggestions about names? We talked about that a little bit before.
Yeah, I really hope they give them names. You know, the capsules are getting names. I really do hope they continue to name the starships. I know there's a plan to at least name one. Elon really wants the first one at Mars to be named Heart of Gold. So I think that's a good indication. They might plan to name the ones that at least carry crew.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
I don't know if
the
they'll
crew
name the cargo ones. Yeah.
Maybe every tanker doesn't need a name, but the crewed ones would make sense. Just like they're doing with Dragon. I think that's what they're doing.
Although I would love it if they just named the tankers Tanker 1.
Or yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we got some more super chats in here.
Sorry, one more. Any suggestions about names? Yes. Oh yes. There is a must. You have to name one of them.
Enterprise,
if there's not a Starship Enterprise, you have failed us, SpaceX. Yeah.
we talked about that. We were wondering if there was any sort of copyright issues on that in that regard.
There would not be. I do not, because the Shuttle Enterprise was named after it, and I really don't think if NASA or if SpaceX, oh boy, there was a slip. If SpaceX went to CBS, which owns all of it now, and said, hey, we want to name it Enterprise so we can call it the Starship Enterprise. Not only do I not think CBS would not like instantly agree to that, I think you would have every living Star Trek cast member there when it launched.
Right.
You know, they would get the most out of that. Yeah.
No, I agree. Actually, we just had, there was a super chat a little while ago that says, just check the name Starship Enterprise is not copyrighted.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think you can copyright the names of ships, but you can copyright the designs of them, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think you can copyright the name of them. So hey, like, let's get a Voyager too.
Yeah. All right, from Ethanum, ever thought about getting a camera drone to fly around during wait times like this to check out the pad, or is that something SpaceX won't allow?
Ooh, not just that SpaceX won't allow, the FAA either. Yeah, no, absolutely not allowed down there.
So even if you, actually, I have the FAA unmanned aerial vehicle licensing, and you would not be able to do that even if you had the licensing for it personally.
Yeah. The same way, like, you can technically have a license to operate one, but not within an X radius of an airport.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Right, Alexander Ash. Imagine a day Starship is normal and common flights take place. What will come next, and if so, what do you think it will be and capable of?
It will be warp drive. Yeah, bigger starships.
Yeah, they're going to scale up Starship and have even bigger versions in the future, and that'll be kind of the next step. Who knows if the design will change significantly? It might literally be, all right, scale everything up 150%, you know?
Sure.
But I think that's the next step, is having bigger and bigger payload capacities and more people on a given ship.
All right, from Arnie Carlson. Thank you very much for the $20 super chat. We've got Gerald Greenwood. What's the nose cone looking thing to the right of SN15? That's the nose cone testing rig. I don't know if you guys can talk any more about that.
Oh, I was going to open with a joke. I was going to say that's a bad nose cone that is in jail.
The nose cone jail. No,
yeah, Thomas, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so that is like I said, it's a structural test article that is actually the nose cone from Starship SN-12. The rest of the Starship was kind of scrapped, but they kept the nose cone around for some additional testing. There's some hydraulic equipment hooked up on the inside, and so we believe that they're doing some sort of testing of forces like exerted from the nose cone. You can see the top of the nose cone has that black cap, which is likely hooked up to that hydraulic equipment on the inside, so they can pull down and apply force on the nose cone. That's just a load testing article of some kind. Don't know if there's more testing planned. I think they did a day of testing not too long ago. Not sure if there's more testing still in the works for that, but it's a structural test article for Starship nose cones.
And part of that too, right, of how they're applying the pressure, right, I would imagine what this is in large part is a maximum dynamic pressure test, where that's the part of the vehicle that's going to take a lot of the initial aero forces as it's approaching the area of maximum dynamic pressure, as well. And this would be a good way to verify on the ground that your computer models that everything will be fine is fine.
Right, exactly.
I love that.
And also, this graphic is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
The immortal Star Hopper. Yeah.
Yes. We're gonna have a bunch of different pictures of the ever-changing Boca Chica skyline, and Star Hopper is just gonna be the part that never moves.
One day it's gonna be like a national landmark. Like.
Oh yeah. From Ray Wilczynski. How will they stack the orbital launch integration tower since it's too high for cranes once they get above the third segment?
I don't know if it is too high for cranes.
I was going to say,
there's some pretty big cranes in the world.
We've got some big cranes there.
Yeah.
They are
bigger cranes. Bigger cranes are the answer.
We're going to make a bigger crane, yeah.
No, seriously, bigger cranes are the answer. It's the same way. It's the same basic way that they build the lightning protection towers at Pad B at the Kennedy Space Center and the ones at Blue Origin's pad. As well, you build with the cranes you've got, and then you bring in the big one to finish it.
All right, let's see. From Digifix. Morning, nerds. If you want a great resource for spaceflight and history, get the Next Space Flight app. It rocks.
Can confirm. Next Space Flight app does run.
There you go. Let's see. From Mo Moser, we've got a super chat. Hope all goes well the third time round. Thank you very much. The third time round. Oh yeah, because this is the third time now. Excuse me. I was just here for yesterday's. Let's see.
Yeah, but 3. Is that what we're on for this one?
Yeah, this is
we had
third.
an attempt last week and then yesterday. Yeah, so.
That's right. Yeah, last week.
And I don't know if anyone can tell, but it is currently pouring rain out there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the last. We should be getting another update in a couple of minutes from the National Weather Service. Here with the latest observations out of Brownsville. But yeah, Jack definitely said it's pouring down rain in our back channel.
Yeah, and this can affect the signal on the robots. You might have seen a couple of them have been stuttering slightly, but likely they probably will wait for the rain to clear up before they launch. So.
All right, let's hope that's going to happen yet today. And the launch window is still from noon Central Time until 8 p.m. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep.
I believe so.
So we've got some time for that to clear up yet.
Yep. Plenty of time.
So Infurious with a 20-pound super chat. Infurious, thank you very much. Musical Wolves with a $4.99 super chat. It's only called the scrub if they bring big brushes to polish the Starship.
That is a joke. When a rocket scrubs over and over again, we say, well, that rocket's got to be the cleanest rocket in the world now.
I like it. From Nabil Shah. Love the stream, guys, all the way from South Africa. When do you think you guys will see star bases in other places / countries?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think in large part it would depend on those countries' willingness or desire to create them. One of the things that Starship is sort of aiming for in its design is this Earth point-to-point transportation for cargo and for cargo and human capability. But a lot of those have been like offshore platforms, right? In terms of the land. In terms of land-based ones, it would really come down to if they want it there and how isolated would it have to be given the sound and the acoustic environment that Super Heavy will produce with 16 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Just the sheer force of it is the primary concern about land use locations and why SpaceX has largely been looking at orbital platforms. Thomas, I'm not sure if there's something you would add to that.
Yeah, I think the path forward might be not really land-based Starship sites in other countries, but like you said, those offshore platforms which would support a lot of international destinations could occasionally need to visit ports in other countries, so like that's as close as you might get